They were not gold-mining aliens. They were not from a wandering 12th planet called Nibiru, and they did not genetically engineer humanity as a slave race to serve them. For the past 50 years, a powerful, exciting story has dominated our idea of ancient Sumeria, a story of extraterrestrial gods who came to Earth and created us. The only problem? The Sumerians never wrote it. The clay tablets, baked in the sun 5,000 years ago, tell a completely different story. A story far stranger, more profound, and more human than any tale of visiting spaceships. Tonight, we erase the fiction and read what the tablets actually say. So where did this story actually come from? How did an idea about a rogue planet and alien gold miners take root in our modern consciousness? The answer, for the most part, begins with one man, Zecharia Sitchin. Sitchin wasn't a historian or a trained archaeologist. He was a businessman and an author who, in 1976, published a book that would change everything, The 12th Planet. His core argument was both simple and shocking. He proposed that the epic myths of the ancient world, specifically those of the Sumerians, were not myths at all. They weren't allegories or religious stories. Instead, he argued, they were distorted memories, garbled accounts of real technological events. He claimed to possess a unique, self-taught ability to translate ancient Sumerian cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script pressed into clay tablets thousands of years ago. And within these ancient texts, where generations of scholars saw gods, poetry, and cosmology, Sitchin found something entirely different. He found his Anunnaki. In his reading, they weren't deities. They were flesh and blood astronauts from a yet undiscovered 12th planet in our solar system called Nibiru. And these astronauts, he claimed, came to Earth with a desperate purpose. They needed gold, not for wealth, but as a raw material to repair the failing atmosphere of their home world. It's a powerful, sweeping narrative, an epic sci-fi saga. It sold millions and millions of books and single-handedly launched an entire genre of ancient astronaut theories that continues to thrive today. But here's the critical point. The entire story rests on a foundation of sand. It is built upon provably incorrect translations and a profound misunderstanding of Mesopotamian religion and culture. For Sitchin's theory to be true, every single accredited expert in the field would have to be wrong. To find the truth, we don't need a secret key or a radical new interpretation. We just need to listen to the people who can actually read the language, the Assyriologists and Sumeriologists who have dedicated their lives to meticulously and accurately deciphering these texts. They don't have a book to sell or a grand conspiracy to promote. They have the scholarship. And when you look at their work, the world that Sitchin built, the world of Nibiru and its alien miners, completely vanishes. It's revealed not as hidden history, but as modern fiction. To understand the Sumerian universe, you have to forget everything you know about modern cosmology. Their story didn't begin with the violent, fiery explosion of a Big Bang. It didn't start with a fleet of starships or a celestial architect. No, for the Sumerians, it all began with water. Before there was light, before there was heaven, before there was earth, there was only the primordial sea. Picture it. A vast, formless, eternal body of water, a dark, silent, unending ocean stretching into an abyss of nothingness. But this sea was not empty. It was not a sterile void. It was alive. It was a goddess. Her name was Namu. She is the mother who gave birth to heaven and earth, the ultimate singular source of all things that ever were or ever would be. In this state of being, there are no planets, no stars, no galaxies swirling in the dark. There is just this cosmic self-creating womb. Namu is both the container and the contained, the process and the product. She is the silent, pregnant potential of everything. From within herself, without any partner, Namu brings forth the first true cosmic structures. They are An, the Sky Father, and Ki, the Earth Mother. But they aren't born as separate beings in the way we'd imagine. They are born locked in a tight, inseparable embrace. Imagine a single cosmic mountain, a unified whole, where Earth and sky are still one. They exist as a single unit floating in the endless waters of their mother Namu. And from this primal union, from the press of sky against Earth, the first generation of gods emerges, born into the darkness between their parents' bodies. They are the first forces, the first wills, the first hint of the complex world to come. So who then were the Anunnaki in this divine family? The name itself likely means princely offspring or offspring of An. They were not a specific race of aliens. They were the highest council of the gods, the most powerful, the most senior deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon. Think of them as the divine board of directors. At the head was An, the sky god, but the one who truly wielded power on Earth was Enlil, the god of wind, air, and storms. His brother Enki was the clever god of wisdom, magic, and the sweet waters of the Abzu, the freshwater ocean that lay beneath the earth. These were the Anunnaki, the great gods who made the decisions that shaped the cosmos. And they had a problem, a labor problem. Before humanity existed, the work of the universe fell to the younger gods, known as the Igigi. For thousands of years, they did the heavy lifting. They dug the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They built the shrines and temples for the Anunnaki. The Atrahasis epic describes their suffering in detail. For 3,600 years, their toil was immense. Finally, they had enough. They burned their tools, surrounded the temple of the chief god Enlil, and declared a general strike. It was the first labor dispute in history, and it was a divine one. The Igigi refused to work. The cosmos was grinding to a halt. Enlil was furious, terrified. The great Anunnaki were faced with a crisis that threatened their entire existence. As the crisis escalated, the resourceful god Enki came up with a plan. He addressed the great gods, proposing a radical solution. Why should gods do the work? Let's create a substitute, a lesser being designed for one purpose, to bear the workload of the gods so they could be at ease. His idea was to fashion this new creature from the clay of the Abzu, the earth's essence, and to bind it with something divine. It was a brilliant, elegant solution to the divine labor crisis. The Anunnaki agreed. A decision was made that would change the fabric of existence forever. But how do you give life, and more importantly, consciousness, to inert clay? The recipe was specific and grim. The gods decided to sacrifice one of their own. A god named Geshtu-E, described as having intelligence, was slain. His blood and flesh were mixed into the clay. This was the divine component, the spark that would animate the new beings. The mother goddess, Nintu, took this mixture. She pinched off 14 pieces of clay. 7 she placed to her right, 7 to her left. From these, the first 7 men and 7 women were created. They were called the Lulu Amelu, the primitive worker. Their purpose was explicitly stated: to take the pickaxe and the basket, to do the work, to feed the gods. This is a critical distinction. The Sitchin narrative paints humanity as a slave race for gold mining. The Sumerian texts paint humanity as a servant race for survival, the gods' survival. Humans were created to provide sustenance and build temples, to maintain cosmic order through ritual and labor. It was a symbiotic relationship, not purely exploitative. Humanity had a clear, defined, and essential purpose in the cosmos. They weren't digging for a rare mineral to fix a spaceship. They were baking bread and brewing beer to place on the altars of their creators. The motivation was divine laziness, not interstellar atmospheric repair. Humanity, however, was a little too successful. They multiplied, they filled the land, and they were noisy. The Atrahasis epic tells us the clamor of mankind became unbearable for Enlil. He couldn't sleep. It wasn't sin or corruption that angered him, it was noise pollution. In his rage, he decided to wipe the slate clean. He convinced the divine assembly to send a great flood to destroy all of humanity. Notice the reason: they were too loud. It's a far cry from cosmic battles or genetic experiments gone wrong. It's the story of a grumpy landlord wanting to evict his noisy tenants. But one god disagreed. Enki, the creator of humanity, couldn't bear to see his creation destroyed. Bound by an oath to the other gods not to warn humans directly, he found a loophole. He went to the reed hut of a pious man named Ziusudra and spoke to the wall. He advised the wall to build a great boat to tear down his house and save his life. Ziusudra, of course, overheard this advice. He built the ark, loaded it with his family and animals, and survived the deluge. When the waters receded and Enlil saw the survivors, he was furious. But Enki reasoned with him, and a new pact was made. Humanity would be allowed to live, but measures like mortality, disease, and infertility were introduced to keep their numbers and their noise in check. This is the original Noah's Ark story, thousands of years before the Bible. So far, we've seen the Anunnaki as a celestial council, the cosmic decision makers, but this was only one of their roles. They had another, far more terrifying job. They were the judges of the underworld. In Mesopotamian belief, after death, the soul journeyed to a bleak, shadowy realm called the Kur, and there, in that land of no return, the Anunnaki held court. They were not saviors from the stars. They were the dreaded arbiters of your fate after death. They upheld the laws of the underworld, and their verdict was absolute and final. This chthonic, or underworld aspect, is completely absent from the ancient astronaut theory, yet it is one of their most prominent roles in the actual texts. Perhaps the most powerful illustration of their authority is found in the myth of the descent of Inanna. Inanna, the queen of heaven, one of the most powerful goddesses, decides to visit the underworld. To do so, she must pass through 7 gates, relinquishing a piece of her power and clothing at each one. She finally arrives naked and powerless before the throne of her sister, Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead. And there, the 7 Anunnaki, the judges, are waiting. The text says, "They fastened their eyes upon her, the eyes of death. They spoke against her a word of wrath. And in that instant, Inanna, the great goddess, was turned into a corpse and hung on a hook." If the Anunnaki could pass a death sentence on a major goddess, what hope did a mere mortal have? So how could Sitchin get it so wrong? It comes down to the nature of cuneiform. It's a complex, polyvalent script. A single sign can be a word, a syllable, or a determinative, a silent sign that tells you the category of the following word. For example, the star symbol can mean An, the sky god. It can also be the determinative for Dingir, meaning god or divinity. Sitchin repeatedly interpreted this star symbol as meaning planet. He took terms that referred to gods and divine realms and translated them with the language of aeronautics and astronomy. He imposed his narrative onto the text rather than letting the text speak for itself. And what about the gold? This is the cornerstone of the ancient astronaut theory. The texts do mention gold, of course. It was a precious material, but it was precious to humans, used to adorn the statues of the gods and decorate their temples. It was a fitting offering for the divine. There is not a single line in any known Mesopotamian text that suggests gold was mined to save another planet's atmosphere. That idea is a complete modern invention, read into the texts where it simply does not exist. The gods wanted offerings, food, and shelter, things a pre-industrial society could actually provide. The famous planet Nibiru. In actual Babylonian astronomy, Nibiru was a term for a specific celestial point. Most scholars associated with the planet Jupiter, marking its position at the meridian or the point of the winter solstice. It was a crossing point in the sky, a navigational marker for other stars. It was not a physical planet with inhabitants on a 3,600-year orbit. The entire narrative of a 12th planet is based on twisting astronomical texts to fit a preconceived story. The Babylonians were brilliant astronomers, but they were observing the sky from Earth, not chronicling the path of their alien homeworld. If the evidence against it is so overwhelming, why is the ancient astronaut theory so popular? The answer is psychological. It offers simple answers to complex questions. How did ancient people build such incredible structures? Aliens helped them. What is our purpose in the universe? We are part of a grand cosmic experiment. It removes the messy, complicated, and often mundane reality of history and replaces it with a thrilling sci-fi epic. It imbues our distant past with a sense of technological wonder that feels familiar to us in the modern age. It's an exciting story. It's just not our story.
And in the end, that's the real tragedy of the Anunnaki alien theory. It robs the ancient Sumerians of their incredible achievements. These were the people who invented writing. They invented the wheel, the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour. They developed the first law codes, the first cities, the first epic literature. They didn't need help from aliens. Their myths, when read for what they are, reveal the very first human attempts to answer the big questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What is our relationship to the divine and to death? Their stories are not primitive science. They are sophisticated theology and profound philosophy. The truth is always more interesting than the fiction. Isn't a story about a divine labor strike and the creation of humanity to solve a celestial noise problem more wonderfully strange and imaginative than a generic tale of resource extraction? Isn't the concept of powerful gods who fear their own creation and judge even their own kind in a bleak underworld more compelling? The Sumerians gave us the foundations of civilization. Their legacy is not in some imagined spaceship. It's in every city we live in, every law we obey, every story we tell. They don't need to be aliens to be worthy of our awe. They just need to be themselves. So, after all of this, what's the final word? Let's be perfectly clear. The Anunnaki were not visitors from another world. That popular image of ancient astronauts, of technologically advanced beings coming down to engineer humanity, it's a modern fiction, a distortion painted over a much older, much more profound canvas. The real Anunnaki were the divine powers of the Sumerian world. They weren't engineers in silver suits. They were the storm, the harvest, the law of the cosmos itself. They were the terrifying power of the flood that could wipe out a city overnight, and the life-giving warmth of the sun that ensured survival. They were the authors of destiny, the ultimate judges in the great court of the universe, who held every human soul accountable. Their story, painstakingly carved wedge by wedge into wet clay, isn't a logbook of extraterrestrial contact. It's a testament to the birth of human imagination itself, the very first draft of our eternal quest for meaning. When we strip away the layers of 20th century myth, when we brush off the thick dust of conspiracy, we find something far more valuable than a story about aliens. We find a genuine connection to the very dawn of our own civilization. This isn't about them, it's about us. It's a look directly into the minds of our distant ancestors as they grappled with the biggest questions for the very first time. Why does the river flood? Who commands the stars? What happens after we die? And the incredible part is, you don't have to take my word for it. The tablets are out there, thousands of them. They've been pulled from the earth, painstakingly translated by dedicated scholars, and their words are available for anyone to see.
The real story isn't locked away in some secret vault. It's waiting in university archives, in academic journals, in books. The real story is waiting for anyone willing to read it. What you've heard before is the lie. An entertaining one, perhaps, but a lie nonetheless. What the tablets actually say, what the Sumerians themselves wrote down 5,000 years ago, that is the truth. And so we have to stop here. But what we've explored today, it's like finding a single intricately carved tablet in the ruins of a library that once stretched to the horizon. The mythology of Mesopotamia is an entire world buried by time, and we've only brushed the sand from one small corner of it. I'm genuinely curious about what aspect of the authentic Sumerian narrative truly resonated with you. Was it the concept of the divine strike, that sudden, terrifying intervention from a god who could erase an entire city with a thought? Or perhaps it was the flood narrative, the original epic of survival against a world submerged in water, a story that would echo through countless later cultures. Maybe it was the revelation of the Anunnaki's true role, not as extraterrestrial visitors, but as the solemn, chthonic judges of the underworld, weighing the lives of mortals in the land of dust and shadow, a far more sobering and profound image. Which of these truths unearthed from the clay was the most powerful for you? Head down to the comments and share your perspective. Our mission here is always to navigate the difficult path between the historical record and the convenient fictions that have grown up around it. If that's a journey you want to continue, if you value cutting through the modern noise to hear the actual voices of the past, then please subscribe to the channel and be sure to activate the notification bell so you won't miss our next investigation into the foundational stories of our world. Thank you for your time and your attention.